I've found someone who understands my ambitions, someone who won't hold me back. The words glowed on my screen like poison. After 12 years of supporting his career while putting mine on hold, my husband Ryan had left me for Olivia Winters, tech heiress, venture capitalist, and apparently, his ticket to the success he thought I was preventing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at my laptop screen, reading the email for the 20th time. 2 in the morning and our bedroom, my bedroom now, felt cavernous and cold. Ryan hadn't even waited until I got home from teaching my kindergarten class. He'd composed his goodbye while my 5-year-old students were making paper butterflies for their parents. The message was businesslike, almost clinical. He'd packed his essential items and moved in with Olivia. He'd make arrangements for the rest of his belongings. He was sorry for any pain caused, but felt we had grown in different directions. 12 years of marriage, dismissed in 5 short paragraphs with the same detachment he'd used to resign from a job. I scrolled down to the final blow. I've transferred $3,000 to your account to help with immediate expenses. My lawyer will be in touch about the house and other assets. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. The silence of our suburban home pressed in on me. This house we'd scrimped and saved for, with its carefully chosen furniture and half-finished renovation projects. The kitchen we'd remodeled last summer when things had already started falling apart between us, though I hadn't recognized it then. "I'm not leaving you, Eliza," he'd said, when I found texts between him and Olivia 3 months ago. "She's just helping me network for the startup. You're overreacting." I'd believed him. I'd always believed him. My phone lit up with a message from Maddie. "Just checking in. Have you heard from Ryan today? Call me." Maddie, my best friend since college. The gnawing feeling in my stomach intensified. Why would Maddie be asking about Ryan? Unless... I called her immediately. "What do you know?" My voice sounded strange, hollow. A pause on the other end. "Eliza, I saw something today, on social media. I wasn't sure if it was real." "Tell me." "There's a photo. Ryan and Olivia Winters at the Tech Vision Summit Gala tonight. They look close." "How close?" I could barely get the words out. Another pause. "They're announcing their engagement. It's all over the tech blogs. Ryan's being named CEO of her new venture fund. I'm so sorry, Eliza." The room tilted sideways. Engagement? They were announcing an engagement the same day he emailed me he was leaving? I hung up without saying goodbye and typed Ryan Bennett Olivia Winters into the search bar. There they were. Ryan in a tuxedo I'd never seen, Olivia radiant. In an emerald gown, her hand on his chest displaying a massive diamond ring. Their smiles gleamed with triumph. The caption read, "Tech Power Couple, Venture Capitalist." Olivia Winters announces engagement to innovative startup strategist Ryan Bennett at tonight's Tech Vision Summit. Winters also names Bennett CEO of her new $200 million fund, Breakthrough Next. The article was time-stamped 7:22 p.m., less than 3 hours after he'd emailed me. I stumbled from the bed, my legs barely supporting me. 12 years. I'd put him through his MBA while I taught kindergarten. I'd moved 3 times for his career. I'd postponed having children because the timing wasn't right for his professional trajectory. I'd believed in his potential when no one else would, and he'd replaced me before even telling me we were over. I made it to the bathroom just in time to throw up. As I rinsed my mouth, I caught my reflection in the mirror, pale, hollow-eyed, a stranger staring back at me. Who was I now? Ryan's wife had been my identity for so long that I wasn't sure what remained beneath it. I wandered back to our bedroom, eyes landing on the photos that lined the dresser. Our wedding day. Ryan's MBA graduation, where I'd stood proudly beside him after years of supporting us on my teacher's salary. Vacations we'd saved for, dreams we'd planned together. In a sudden surge of rage, I swept them all to the floor, the shattering glass oddly satisfying. One frame landed face up, unbroken. Ryan and me on the day we closed on this house, his arm around my waist, both of us beaming with pride. We'd been so happy then, or maybe I'd been happy, and he'd been settling. My phone kept buzzing with notifications. News travels fast, even at 2 a.m. Friends checking in. Worried messages, shocked reactions. Tomorrow everyone would know. My kindergartner's parents would whisper at drop-off. My colleagues would give me pitying looks. I'd be poor Eliza, whose husband left her for a billionaire's daughter. I turned it off and collapsed onto the bed, curling into myself. The space on my finger where my wedding ring had been until an hour ago felt naked, exposed. I'd slipped it off and dropped it into the sink drain after reading the email. A childish gesture, perhaps, but it had felt necessary. The night stretched endlessly before me. I stared at the ceiling, calculating finances in my head. We'd bought more house than we could afford because Ryan was so certain his career was about to take off. The mortgage alone was nearly 2/3 of my take-home pay. I had some savings, but not enough. Ryan's promised $3,000 would barely cover next month's bills. I'd spent 12 years investing in Ryan's future. Now I had no husband, a house I couldn't afford, and a career I'd kept in holding pattern for his sake. As dawn broke, I made myself a cup of tea with trembling hands. The morning light illuminated the kitchen we'd designed together, the marble countertops he'd insisted were worth the splurge. On the refrigerator, a save-the-date magnet for his colleague's wedding mocked me, a future event I now wouldn't attend, one of many plans suddenly evaporated. I sat at our kitchen island, watching. The sunrise of my first day as a soon-to-be ex-wife. What Ryan didn't know, what I barely remembered myself in that moment of desolation, was that his betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I managed to get through the school day somehow. Each smile for my students felt like it might crack my face. Each sympathetic glance from coworkers who'd seen the news twisted the knife deeper. By the time I pulled into my driveway that afternoon, I was emotionally spent. A familiar car was parked in front of my house. Maddie's silver Subaru. Relief washed over me. I needed my best friend right now. She was sitting on my porch steps, her dark curls pulled into a messy bun, wearing yoga clothes and an expression I couldn't quite read. When she saw me, she stood quickly. "I've been trying to call you all day," she said, her voice tight. I realized my phone was still turned off from last night. "Sorry, I just couldn't deal with it today." Maddie followed me inside. The house was exactly as I'd left it. Broken picture frames still scattered across the bedroom floor, my teacup from dawn still sitting on the kitchen counter. I hadn't had the energy to clean anything up. "God, Eliza, I'm so sorry about all this." She hovered by the kitchen island, not sitting down. "I need to tell you something, and you're going to hate me for it." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "I've known about Ryan and Olivia for longer than I let on last night." The words tumbled out quickly. Not about the engagement, that blindsided me too, but about them seeing each other. Since January. January, 6 months ago. You've known for 6 months that my husband was cheating on me? My voice was barely a whisper. Maddie's eyes filled with tears. He swore to me it was just a professional relationship at first. Then he said they'd gotten close, but he was going to end it. Then he said he was working up the courage to tell you. She trailed off, seeing my expression. "I know. I should have told you. I was trying to protect you until I knew for sure." "Protect me?" I laughed, the sound brittle and strange. 6 months, Maddie. 6 months of me believing his lies. 6 months of me thinking our marriage still had a chance. He's my friend too, Eliza. I was caught in the middle. In the middle? My voice rose. There is no middle when your best friend's husband is cheating on her. You pick a side and it should have been mine. I know that now, she said quietly. But there's more. More. Of course there was more. The startup Ryan's been trying to launch? Olivia's been funding it secretly since December. That's how they met. She approached him at that Christmas charity gala we all attended. The charity gala, where Ryan had looked so handsome in his suit, where I'd felt so proud to be his wife, where, apparently, he'd met the woman he would leave me for while I was across the room bidding on silent auction items. But that's not why. I'm here, Maddie continued, her voice now shaking slightly. Ryan called me this morning. His lawyer wants you out of the house by the end of the month. The room seemed to tilt. What? This is my home, too. My name is on the mortgage. Apparently, Olivia's father bought the mortgage from the bank last week. They own the loan now, and they're calling it due unless… She couldn't meet my eyes. Unless what, Maddie? Unless you sign papers agreeing to a quick, uncontested divorce with a settlement they've prepared. She pulled a large envelope from her bag. Ryan asked me to give you this. Their lawyer drew it up. I snatched the envelope from her hands. He sent you as his messenger? He couldn't even face me himself. He said you wouldn't answer his calls. My phone's been off. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a stack of legal documents and a note on expensive stationery. Eliza, I hope you'll see this is fair and generous. Sign and return to my lawyer by Friday, and the funds will be transferred immediately. It's best for both of us to move forward quickly. Ryan. The generous settlement, $50,000 cash, no alimony, no claim to Ryan's business interests, and I had to vacate the house within 30 days. In exchange, Ryan would assume the remaining mortgage debt before the house changed hands. He can't do this, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure. Ryan had always handled our finances. For all I knew, he'd found some legal way to trap me. There's one more thing, Maddie said, her voice now barely audible. Olivia's family. They're offering me a job, running their charitable foundation. I stared at her, uncomprehending for a moment. Then it hit me. You're going to work for them? For the people who are trying to throw me out of my home? It's not like that, Eliza. I was approached weeks ago before any of this happened. Before any of what happened? Before Ryan left me? Or before you knew he was cheating? Her silence was answer enough. Get out. My voice was deadly calm. Eliza. Please, get out! I screamed it this time, surprised by my own volume. Get out of my house! Get out of my life! Maddie backed toward the door. I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I'll always be your friend when you're ready. The door closed behind her. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of my marriage, the betrayal of my best friend, and the eviction notice from my home, all within 24 hours. I slid to the floor, the divorce papers scattered around me like fallen leaves. My entire life was collapsing, and I had nowhere to turn. No husband, no best friend. Soon, no home. As night fell, I sat in darkness, too numb even for tears. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Eliza, it's Simon Blackwood. I just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. If you need a lawyer, call me. No charge. This isn't right. Simon Blackwood, my late Uncle Richard's attorney. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral 3 years ago. In the depths of my despair, that simple message was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Someone was on my side, someone who understood the law, someone who might help me fight back. I didn't know it then, but that text message would change everything. The offices of Blackwood and Associates occupied the 10th floor of a dignified brick building downtown. I'd been here once before, for the reading of Uncle Richard's will. I remembered little of that day, consumed as I was by grief. Uncle Richard had been more father than uncle to me after my parents died. Simon Blackwood met me at the elevator. In his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he had the calm, reassuring presence of someone who had seen it all. "Eliza." He clasped my hand in both of his. "I'm glad you called." He led me to his corner, office with its wall of books and view of the city. The space felt solid, permanent, the opposite of how my life felt right now. "Coffee?" he offered. I nodded, realizing I hadn't eaten or drunk anything since yesterday's tea. My hands trembled slightly as I placed Ryan's divorce papers on his desk. "I assume these are the documents in question?" Simon asked, reaching for his reading. "Glasses." "Yes. He wants me to sign by Friday. I don't know what to do." My voice cracked. "I can't afford a lawyer, Simon. I can barely afford groceries right now." "I told you, no charge. Your uncle was more than a client to me. He was my friend." He examined the papers methodically, his expression growing increasingly troubled. After what seemed like forever, he set them down and looked at me. "This is unusually aggressive," he said carefully, "especially given the length of your marriage and your financial contributions to Mr. Bennett's education." "Is it legal?" "Parts of it, yes. The mortgage situation is concerning. I'll need to investigate that further." He leaned back in his chair. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." For the next hour, I poured out the whole sordid story: Ryan's betrayal, Maddie's deception, the public humiliation, the financial trap I now found myself in. Simon listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "I won't sugarcoat this, Eliza. They're trying to bulldoze you while you're vulnerable. It's a classic tactic when one party has significantly more resources." "So what do I do?" "First, you do not sign these papers." He tapped the documents firmly. "Second, you give me authorization to represent you, and I'll request a full financial disclosure. Mr. Bennett appears to have hidden assets that should be considered in any settlement." "I can't pay you, Simon. Not now. Maybe not for a long time." I said, "No charge. Consider it a debt I owe Richard." Something in his expression made me think there was more to that story, but I was too exhausted to press. "Now," he continued, "tell me about your immediate needs. Housing, finances." "I have about $8,000 in savings. Ryan transferred $3,000 as mentioned in his email. My salary covers basic living expenses, but not the mortgage, and apparently I need to be out in 30 days. You won't be going anywhere in 30 days, I assure you." His confidence was reassuring. "But you need support right now, Eliza, not just legal. Who can you stay with temporarily just until we sort this out?" I stared at my hands. "No one. My parents are gone. Uncle Richard was my only family. Maddie." I couldn't finish the sentence. "What about other friends? Colleagues?" "I'm not close with my coworkers. We're friendly, but..." I trailed off, realizing how isolated I'd become. Ryan's career had always taken precedence. We'd moved so many times that I'd never put down roots anywhere. Simon studied me thoughtfully. "If I may make a suggestion, my sister Diana runs a guest house on her property. It's small but comfortable, and currently vacant. She's a retired literature professor with more books than furniture and a pathological need to feed people. You'd be doing her a favor, actually. She gets lonely." I opened my mouth to refuse, pride warring with necessity, but Simon raised a hand. "Before you say no, consider this. Strategic retreat is not surrender. Sometimes you need a safe harbor before you can navigate the storm." Tears welled in my eyes. the first I'd shed since finding Ryan's email. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. In the meantime, I'll get started on your case. He wrote down an address on a notepad and slid it across the desk. Diana's place, just in case. As I stood to leave, Simon asked, "Did Richard ever mention a property to you? A cabin or a vacation home, perhaps?" I frowned, thinking. He had a lake house in Minnesota. We went there a few times when I was younger. Why? Just checking some details. I'll explain later, when I have more information. He walked me to the elevator. Eliza, one more thing. Ryan and Ms. Winters may have money and influence, but they've made a critical error. What's that? They've underestimated you. And in my experience, that's always a mistake. As the elevator doors closed, I felt something I hadn't felt since reading Ryan's email. A small flicker of hope. That evening, I parked outside a charming Victorian house on a tree-lined street across town. The guest house Simon had mentioned was visible at the back of the property, a small cottage with a red door and window boxes full of flowers. Before I could lose my nerve, I grabbed my overnight bag and walked up the path to the main house. I'd only planned to inquire, to see the place, but somehow I knew I wouldn't be going back to the house I'd shared with Ryan tonight, or maybe ever. The door opened before I could knock. Diana Blackwood had the same kind eyes as her brother, though her hair was fully silver and styled in a stylish bob. She wore a flowing tunic over jeans, reading glasses hanging on a chain around her neck. "You must be Eliza," she said warmly. Simon called. "I've just put the kettle on." Her house was exactly as Simon had described. Books everywhere, comfortable, furniture that invited you to sink in and stay a while. The kitchen smelled of something delicious baking. "Blueberry scones," Diana explained, following my gaze to the oven. "Stress baking. It's better than the alternatives." She poured tea into mismatched mugs and pushed one toward me. "Simon told me the basics. Enough to know you've had a hellish few days. The cottage is yours for as long as you need it. No arguments about rent until you're back on your feet." "I can't," I began. "Of course you can," she interrupted firmly. "Besides, I need someone to water my plants when I visit my grandchildren next month. You'd be doing me a favor." I knew it wasn't true, but I also knew when to accept grace when it was offered. "Thank you. Now, drink your tea and have a scone. Everything seems more manageable with food in your stomach and a plan. Simon says you're a kindergarten teacher?" "Yes, at Westridge Elementary." "Wonderful. My granddaughter starts kindergarten this fall. Not at your school, unfortunately. They're in Chicago. But she's terribly excited about it." Diana chatted easily about her family, asking nothing about mine, giving me space to simply be. Later, she showed me to the cottage. It was small but perfect. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living area with a desk by the window overlooking her garden. Someone had placed fresh flowers on the table and turned down the bed. "I'll leave you to settle in," Diana said. "There's food in the fridge, bathrooms stocked with necessities. Wi-Fi password is on the fridge. If you need anything, just come to the main house." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the kindness of these virtual strangers. For the first time since Ryan's email, I allowed myself to really cry. Great, heaving sobs that seemed to come from the depths of my soul. When the tears finally stopped, I felt emptied out, but somehow lighter. I unpacked my small bag, placing my few belongings around the cottage. Tomorrow I would need to go back to the house to get more clothes, but tonight, this sanctuary was enough. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about what Simon had said. They had underestimated me. Perhaps I had underestimated myself too. Tomorrow I would begin to find out what I was truly made of. A week passed in Diana's guest cottage. Each day followed the same pattern. Teach kindergarten while pretending my world hadn't imploded. meet with Simon during lunch breaks to discuss legal strategy, return to the cottage to grade papers, and try not to obsessively check social media for news of Ryan and Olivia. Their engagement photos had made it into several business publications, always with the same narrative. Visionary heiress Olivia Winters and innovative strategist Ryan Bennett, poised to revolutionize venture capital. No mention of his abandoned wife or 12-year marriage. It was as if I had never existed. Simon had filed counter-proposals to Ryan's divorce terms and requested comprehensive financial disclosures. Ryan's lawyer, a shark from a prestigious firm undoubtedly paid for by Olivia's family, was stonewalling. "They're playing hardball," Simon told me during our Friday meeting in his wood-paneled office. "But they've made some procedural errors we can leverage. I need you to do something for me, though. Anything." I sat straighter in my chair, ready for whatever task might help my case. "Go back to your house this weekend. Look for financial documents, particularly anything related to Ryan's startup or communications with Olivia and her family. Tax returns, bank statements, emails, anything that might show when their relationship truly began, and what assets he might be hiding." I dreaded going back to the house. I'd been there only once since moving to Diana's, a quick trip to grab more clothes while Ryan was at work. But Simon was right. I needed evidence. Saturday morning found me parked in my own driveway, stealing myself to enter. The house looked unchanged from the outside, but something felt different. It was no longer home. The flower beds I'd tended so carefully were already showing signs of neglect. The welcome mat, the one I'd picked out on our anniversary trip to Maine, was slightly askew. I used my key, half expecting it not to work, but the door opened smoothly. Inside, I noticed subtle differences. Some of Ryan's things were missing. His favorite coffee mug, the throw blanket he liked, several books from the shelves. The framed photo of us in Yellowstone was gone from the mantel, leaving a conspicuous, dust-free rectangle. He'd been back while I was gone. The air felt stale and unused. I opened a window, letting in a spring breeze that seemed to chase some of the ghosts away. Then I got to work. I started in the home office, methodically going through filing cabinets and desk drawers. Most financial documents were gone. Tax returns, investment statements, bank records. Ryan had cleaned house. The drawer where we kept important papers was completely empty except for old warranties and instruction manuals. "Damn it," I muttered, sitting back on my heels. Of course he would cover his tracks. Ryan was nothing if not thorough when his professional reputation was at stake. I checked his computer next, but he'd taken it with him. The external hard drive where we kept backups was missing too. My stomach sank. This wasn't looking promising. I was about to give up when I remembered the loose floorboard in the closet. Ryan had discovered it when we moved in and joked about hiding treasures there. "Like in the movies," he'd said, lifting it to reveal the small space beneath. Had he remembered it when collecting his documents? I went to the closet and pushed aside the hanging files and storage boxes. The board was exactly as I remembered, slightly warped compared to the others. I pried it up with my fingernails, heart racing with hope. Nothing. Just dust and an old pen. I sighed, letting the board fall back into place. Deflated, I moved to our bedroom, my old bedroom, to collect more of my belongings. The bed was still unmade from the night I'd left, one of my earrings still on the nightstand where I'd removed it before showering that fateful afternoon. As I was packing winter clothes from the back of the closet, my hand brushed against something, in the pocket of my heavy wool coat, a coat I hadn't worn since Uncle Richard's funeral 3 years ago. I pulled out a small, tarnished key with a faded tag attached. In my uncle's neat handwriting, Lake House, North Bedroom Closet. A memory stirred, connecting to what Simon had asked about the other day. I stared at the key, memories flooding back. Uncle Richard's lake house in northern Minnesota. We'd spent summers there when I was young, swimming and canoeing during the day, reading by the fireplace on cool evenings. After his death, the property had gone to a cousin I barely knew. At least, that's what I'd thought. Curious now, I searched the closet more thoroughly, looking for anything else I might have forgotten. Behind a row of shoes, I found a dusty cardboard box labeled Richard Personal. I vaguely remembered bringing it home after the funeral, intending to sort through it, then forgetting in the midst of returning to work and normal life. The box contained odds and ends, old photographs of my uncle with my parents, a few books. With his notes in the margins, a pipe he'd stopped using years before his death, and a worn leather journal. The journal looked like something my uncle had carried with him everywhere in his later years. I'd never seen its contents. I opened it carefully, the leather creaking slightly. The pages were filled with his familiar handwriting. Observations, quotes he liked, sketches of plants and birds. My uncle had been an amateur naturalist with a particular love for native Minnesota wildlife. I flipped through it, smiling at his detailed drawings of chickadees and loons, pausing when a folded document fell out from between the pages. It was a letter, addressed to me, dated 1 week before his death. My dearest Eliza, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and things didn't go according to plan at the will reading. I fear my cousin Jeffrey may have interfered. He never approved of how I chose to distribute my assets. What you should know, the lake house is yours. Always has been, always will be. I put it in a separate trust for you years ago, with specific instructions that you were to be informed on your 35th birthday or upon my death, whichever came later. Since I'm writing this letter, I suspect the latter has occurred. The key enclosed opens a safe in the north bedroom closet. Inside you'll find everything you need: deed, trust documents, and something else I've been keeping for you. Jeffrey doesn't know about any of this, and it's best kept that way. Contact Simon Blackwood immediately. He's the only other person aware of these arrangements. Remember what I always told you. Fortune favors not just the brave, but the patient. Your time has come, my dear girl. With all my love, Uncle Richard. My hand shook as I reread the letter. The lake house was mine? Had been for 3 years? Why hadn't Simon told me? And who was Jeffrey? I dialed Simon's number immediately, my heart pounding. Simon, I found a letter from Uncle Richard about the lake house and a key. A pause. Then, urgently, where are you right now? At my house. Ryan's house. Whatever. Stay there. I'm coming over. Don't tell anyone what you've found. 30 minutes later, Simon was sitting at my kitchen table, examining the letter and key with an intense focus. He looked both excited and concerned, running his finger over the tarnished metal as if it held secrets beyond its obvious purpose. I've been looking for this, he said finally. When Richard died, everything was in order except the lake house documentation. Jeffrey produced a deed showing ownership transfer to himself, dated a week before Richard's death. I never believed it was legitimate, but without evidence. So the property could still be mine? Not could be. Is yours. I've been investigating this for 3 years, Eliza. Jeffrey falsified documents. The trust Richard established for you is ironclad. I was planning to tell you next week after I received the final confirmation from the county recorder's office. I sank into a chair, trying to process this information. I don't understand. Why wouldn't you tell me this was even a possibility? Because Jeffrey is powerful and vindictive. He contested Richard's will and tried to claim everything, not just the lake property. I didn't want to give you false hope or put you in Jeffrey's crosshairs until I was certain. He tapped the key. This changes everything. We need to go to the lake house immediately. Now? I looked down at my sweatpants and t-shirt. Hardly appropriate attire for reclaiming a lost inheritance. Now. Jeffrey is out of the country until Tuesday. This may be our only chance to access the property without confrontation. His voice had an urgency I hadn't heard before. What about Ryan? The divorce proceedings? They can wait. This is more important, potentially much more important than you realize. 3 hours later, we were driving north on the highway. Diana packed in the back seat with snacks and moral support. She'd insisted on coming when Simon called her. I've been listening to Simon obsess over this case for 3 years, she told me, passing me a thermos of coffee. I wouldn't miss the finale for anything. Besides, someone needs to keep this one from getting too caught up in legal details. She nodded toward her brother, who was focused intently on the road. As we drove through the greening Minnesota countryside, Simon filled me in on the details. Uncle Richard had been wealthy, far wealthier than I'd realized. The modest inheritance I'd received after his death, $50,000 and some personal items, was just a fraction of his estate. The bulk had gone to charitable foundations, with one significant exception, the lake property. It's not just a cabin, Simon explained. It's a considerable estate, 16 acres of prime lakefront property with the main house and several outbuildings. Richard bought it decades ago before that area became extremely valuable. It's worth several million now, conservatively. I nearly choked on my coffee. Million? As in multiple millions of dollars? At least. The land alone would be worth a fortune to developers, though Richard's trust stipulates it can't be sold for commercial development. But why wouldn't he tell me about it? Why the secrecy and the trust? Simon exchanged a glance with Diana in the rearview mirror. Your uncle had a complicated relationship with money. He believed it could corrupt people, change them. He wanted you to establish your own life, your own identity, before this responsibility fell to you. And I suppose he was right about Jeffrey, Diana added from the back seat. The man's been obsessed with claiming that property ever since Richard died. There's something there he wants badly. Jeffrey is your uncle's cousin? What's his stake in all this? Second cousin, Simon corrected. And officially, none. He was always envious of Richard's success, always felt entitled to a share. But Richard saw through him years ago and specifically excluded him from his will. The sun was setting as we pulled onto the long, tree-lined drive leading to the lake house. The property was even more beautiful than I remembered. Tall pines, surrounding a sprawling craftsman-style house that overlooked the shimmering lake. Golden light bathed the stone and timber exterior, making it look like something from a fairy tale. It's been maintained, I noted, surprised. The gardens were tended, the house freshly painted. I had expected 3 years of neglect. Richard established a maintenance trust, Simon explained. Caretakers come weekly. No one lives here, but it's kept ready. Jeffrey's been trying to gain access for years, but the security system and caretakers have kept him out. Inside, the house was just as I remembered. Warm wood paneling, comfortable furniture, shelves of books. It smelled of pine and lake water and distant memories of childhood summers. Nothing had changed, yet everything had. This wasn't just my uncle's beloved retreat anymore. Somehow, impossibly, it was mine. We headed directly for the north bedroom. The closet was large, a walk-in with cedar lining. I examined the walls, looking for a safe. There. Diana pointed to a section of paneling that looked slightly different from the rest. The key fit perfectly into an almost invisible keyhole. The panel swung open to reveal a small safe. Inside was a stack of documents in a leather portfolio and a smaller wooden box. Simon took the documents while I examined the box. Inside was a letter, similar to the one I'd found at home, and beneath it, a USB drive and a small velvet pouch. The pouch contained an antique gold locket on a delicate chain, my grandmother's, I realized. I'd admired it as a child. The letter was brief. Eliza. With this property comes responsibility. The USB drive contains everything you need to know about the Winters Foundation and what they've been hiding. Use it wisely and when the time is right. The locket was your grandmother's. She would have wanted you to have it. Inside is something she called her good luck charm. She said it reminded her that patience and preparation always overcome brute force. Love always. The Winters Foundation? I looked up at Simon, stunned by the implications. As in Olivia Winters? That can't be a coincidence. Simon was reading through the documents, his expression growing increasingly astonished. Eliza, do you know what these are? I shook my head, watching as he laid out paper after paper on the bed. Evidence of embezzlement and tax fraud on a massive scale. The Winters Foundation has been siphoning charitable donations into private accounts for years. Richard was on their board briefly before he resigned in protest. He looked up, eyes wide. He was building a case against them. Against Olivia's family? The people who are now backing my husband? It appears so. And there's more. He held up a document. This is a list of properties secretly acquired by the foundation using misappropriated funds. And look at this address. He pointed to an item halfway down the list. It was my address. The house Ryan and I had bought 3 years ago. I don't understand, I whispered. If I'm reading this correctly, your house was originally purchased by a shell company owned by the Winters Foundation, then sold to you and Ryan at what must have appeared to be market value. Do you remember who handled the sale? I tried to think back. A real estate agent Ryan knew from business school. He said we were getting a good deal because the previous owner needed to sell quickly. This suggests the sale was never arm's length. The Winters have owned your house all along. Diana had taken the USB drive to her laptop. Oh my, she breathed. After a moment. Simon, you need to see this. Bank records, emails, offshore accounts. There's enough here to put several people away for a very long time. I opened the locket with trembling fingers. Inside was not a photo as I expected, but a tiny microSD card. There's more, I whispered, holding it up. As night fell over the lake, we sat on the screened porch, the magnitude of what we'd discovered sinking in. A chorus of frogs and crickets provided a surreal soundtrack to our conversation. Uncle Richard hadn't just left me a valuable property. He'd left me leverage, the kind that could change everything. What do I do with all this? I asked finally, looking between Simon and Diana. Go to the authorities? Simon steepled his fingers. That's one option. But timing is crucial. The Winters family is powerful. They have connections in law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, even the judiciary. If we don't play this exactly right, they could bury it. Or bury us, Diana added grimly. And what about Ryan? Do you think he knows? About any of this? Simon considered. Hard to say. He may be a pawn, or he may be complicit. Either way, this puts you in a completely different negotiating position. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface of the locket, feeling its weight, both physical and metaphorical. Uncle Richard knew. Somehow he knew I would need this exactly when I did. Richard always played the long game, Simon said. He must have seen something in the Winters Foundation years ago that concerned him enough to start investigating. And to make sure you would eventually have this information, Diana added. I looked out at the moonlight shimmering on the lake's surface. From disaster had come opportunity, an unexpected, game-changing opportunity. For the first time since reading Ryan's email, I felt a sense of empowerment replace my heartbreak and humiliation. Simon, I said finally, I think it's time we change our approach to my divorce proceedings. He smiled, something wolfish in his expression. I couldn't agree more. As we talked late into the night, plans forming and evolving, I kept returning to Uncle Richard's words. Fortune favors not just the brave, but the patient. I'd been patient for 12 years, supporting Ryan, believing in our future together. Now it was time to be brave. Monday morning found us back in Simon's office, the conference room table covered with documents, laptops open to financial records, and a digital forensics expert named Marcus examining the micro SD card from my grandmother's locket. "This is even more significant than I initially thought," Simon said, organizing papers into neat stacks. "The Winters Foundation isn't just embezzling from their own charity, they're laundering money for several high-profile clients through a network of shell companies. Including Olivia's father," Diana added, looking up from her laptop. "He appears to be the mastermind." I tried to wrap my head around it all. And my uncle discovered this while serving on their board? Based on the dates of these documents, Richard began investigating them about 5 years ago. He was meticulous, gathering evidence slowly, carefully. He must have resigned from the board when he had enough to understand what was happening, but not enough to bring them down. "Why wouldn't he go to the authorities?" I asked. "Same reason we're being cautious now," Marcus said, looking up from his computer. "The Winters family has people everywhere. Without an airtight case and the right allies, exposing them could be dangerous." He turned his laptop toward us. "And speaking of airtight cases, this micro SD card is extraordinary. It contains audio recordings of board meetings where illegal activities were explicitly discussed." My uncle recorded their meetings? I was shocked. The deliberate planning this would have required was staggering. Not just recorded them, he documented everything: dates, participants, context. And listen to this. Marcus played a clip. A man's voice, refined and commanding. "The Bennett acquisition shows promise. He's hungry, malleable, and his connection to the Harrington estate gives us a potential avenue to those lakefront properties we've been trying to secure for years." A woman's voice responded, "His wife could be problematic. She's Richard Harrington's niece." "The wife won't be an issue," the man replied dismissively. "Our sources indicate the marriage is already strained, and Bennett is ambitious. He'll choose advancement over sentiment when the time comes." The recording ended. I sat frozen, ice spreading through my veins. "That was from 18 months ago," Marcus said quietly. "The Bennett acquisition," I repeated, my voice hollow. "They were talking about Ryan, about recruiting him, about me being problematic because of Uncle Richard." Simon's expression was grim. "It appears they targeted Ryan specifically because of your connection to Richard and the lake property. They must have learned about the trust somehow. So our entire relationship was, what? A long con? A business strategy?" The possibility was so painful I could barely form the words. "Not necessarily from the beginning," Diana said gently. "But, at some point, the Winters family identified Ryan as useful to their purposes. And Olivia as the perfect bait," I finished bitterly. "The timing fits. Ryan started mentioning the Winters Foundation about 2 years ago, saying they might fund his startup idea." Simon nodded. "They probably approached him with legitimate business first, drew him in gradually. Then Olivia happened to meet him at that Christmas gala." The pieces were falling into place, each one a fresh wound. "And he chose advancement over sentiment, just like they predicted." "Eliza." Simon leaned forward, his expression intense. "I know this is painful, but it also gives us extraordinary leverage. The Winters family doesn't just want your divorce settlement to be quick and quiet. They need it to be. They can't risk you digging too deeply into their affairs or the circumstances of your marriage. Because I might find exactly what we've found," I finished. "Precisely. And now we have options." He laid out 3 folders. Option 1, we go to the FBI. This level of financial fraud and money laundering falls under federal jurisdiction. Richard's evidence is compelling, though we'd need to be careful about how it was obtained. Option 2, Diana continued. We use this information to negotiate a much more favorable divorce settlement. The Winters family would pay handsomely to keep this quiet. And option 3? I asked. Simon and Diana exchanged glances. We go bigger, Simon said. Richard wasn't just collecting evidence for a criminal case. He was positioning himself to take control of the Winters Foundation. These documents include bylaws, voting rights, proxy statements, everything needed to stage what amounts to a hostile takeover of their charity. A takeover? How is that possible? I'm not on the board. I have no standing. Actually, you do. Simon pulled out another document. Richard left you his board seat in a separate codicil to his will. It was never executed because Jeffrey claimed Richard had resigned from the board before his death. But these recordings prove otherwise. So, I could claim my seat on the board, I said slowly. And then what? I'd still be outnumbered. Not necessarily, Marcus spoke up again. According to these bylaws, board members implicated in criminal activity can be removed by a 2/3 vote. With the evidence your uncle gathered, you could potentially remove several members, including Olivia's father, and with proxy votes from other members who'd want to distance themselves from the scandal, you could effectively take control, Simon finished. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city below as I processed the enormity of what they were suggesting. Taking control of the Winters Foundation would mean stepping into a world I knew nothing about: high finance, corporate governance, charity management. It would mean becoming a public figure, something I'd never aspired to, but it would also mean honoring Uncle Richard's work, cleaning up an organization that was supposed to be helping people, not enriching its directors. And yes, if I was being honest with myself, it would mean a kind of justice that no divorce settlement could provide. What would happen to Ryan in each scenario? I asked finally, turning back to face them. If we go to the FBI, he could face criminal charges if he was knowingly involved in their schemes, Simon said. If we negotiate a settlement, he'd likely walk away unscathed, but significantly less wealthy than he's expecting to be. And if we pursue the takeover, he'd be exposed as either a criminal or a pawn, Diana finished. Either way, his reputation in the business world would be severely damaged. I thought about Ryan's dismissive email, his public engagement announcement before I'd even had time to process our separation, the cold calculation of it all. Had any of it been real? Had he ever loved me? Or had I just been a useful connection to my uncle's world? I need time to think, I said finally. This is overwhelming. Of course, Simon agreed. But we should decide soon. Ryan's lawyer has been calling all morning, pressing for a response to their settlement offer. Tell them I'm considering my options, I said, a new firmness in my voice. And that I'll be in touch by the end of the week. That evening, back in Diana's guest cottage, I spread Uncle Richard's journal on the small desk. His handwriting seemed to speak to me across time, full of wisdom and foresight. I found myself wishing desperately that I could talk to him, ask him what he would do. But perhaps in a way he had already told me. The evidence he'd compiled, the careful documentation, the strategic positioning, it all pointed toward the most ambitious option. Uncle Richard hadn't spent years gathering evidence just to negotiate a better settlement for me. He'd been playing a much longer game. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Eliza, my lawyer says you're stalling. This isn't productive for either of us. The offer is more than fair. Another text followed immediately. Dinner at Castellino's Friday night? We should talk in person. For old time's sake. Castellino's. Our favorite restaurant for special occasions. The place where we'd celebrated job offers, anniversaries, his MBA graduation. The place where, I suddenly realized, he'd first mentioned meeting Olivia Winters at that Christmas gala. Was he truly reaching out, or was this another calculated move? Perhaps the Winters family was getting nervous about my silence, sending Ryan to gauge what I might know. I considered ignoring the text, but something stopped me. If I was going to make an informed decision about how to proceed, I needed to look Ryan in the eyes one more time. I needed to know if I could see the truth there. Friday at 7. Don't be late. I pressed send before I could reconsider. The next morning, I asked for a personal day from school and drove back to the lake house alone. I needed to connect with the property that had suddenly become mine, to understand what it meant beyond its monetary value or strategic importance. The day was perfect. Clear blue skies, a gentle breeze, the lake sparkling in the sunlight. I walked the perimeter of the property, reacquainting myself with places I'd known as a child. The dock where Uncle Richard had taught me to fish, the small boathouse with its weathered canoe, the clearing where we'd toasted marshmallows over summer campfires. Inside the main house, I explored more thoroughly than we had on our hurried visit. Each room held memories, but also possibilities. This wasn't just a vacation home. It was an estate, beautifully designed and immaculately maintained. In what had been my uncle's study, I found bookshelves filled with volumes on finance, corporate governance, environmental conservation, and philanthropy. Had he been preparing me all along, laying the groundwork for a future he envisioned but wouldn't live to see? On his desk sat a framed photo I remembered, Uncle Richard and me on this very property. Me about 10 years old, proudly holding up a smallmouth bass I'd caught. We were both laughing, sunburned and happy. "What would you do?" I asked the photo. "What did you want me to do with all of this?" As if in answer, my eyes fell on a book lying open on the desk, a biography of Melinda Gates. A passage was underlined. "Power is not given to you. You have to take it." Beside it, in Uncle Richard's handwriting, "For E, when the time comes." I sank into his desk chair, suddenly certain. Uncle Richard hadn't just left me a property and evidence of wrongdoing. He'd left me a mission. I called Simon. "I've made my decision." "Which option?" he asked. "None of them." And all of them. I took a deep breath. "I want to do this my way." I outlined my plan, a synthesis of the options they'd presented but with my own approach, one that felt true to who I was and what Uncle Richard would have wanted. By the time I finished, Simon was uncharacteristically quiet. "It's risky," he said finally. "But Richard would have loved it. Bold but principled. Can you help me put it in motion before Friday? I'm having dinner with Ryan." "Ambitious timeline," Simon said, but I could hear the smile in his voice. "Diana and I will clear our schedules." As I drove back to the city that afternoon, I felt a transformation taking place within me. The heartbroken, betrayed woman who'd read Ryan's goodbye email was giving way to someone stronger, more strategic, someone who understood her own power. The lake house wasn't just property, it was potential. The evidence wasn't just leverage, it was responsibility. And the path ahead wasn't just about a divorce settlement. It was about justice, purpose, and reclaiming my life on my own terms. For the first time in years, possibly in my entire adult life, I wasn't defining myself in relation to Ryan or anyone else. I was charting my own course. Uncle Richard had seen this potential in me long before I recognized it in myself. Now, looking toward Friday's confrontation with Ryan, I felt ready to step into the role he'd prepared me for. The woman who would meet Ryan at Castellino's wouldn't be the same one he'd so carelessly discarded. She would be someone he never truly knew existed, someone even I was just beginning to discover. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Simon's office became our war room, with Diana bringing in meals and Marcus providing technical expertise as we refined our strategy. Yellow legal pads filled with notes covered every surface, and the conference room walls were papered with flowcharts, timelines, and profiles of key players in the Winters Foundation. "The key is timing," Simon emphasized repeatedly, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against the mahogany table. "Each move must be perfectly sequenced. We get one shot at this." We started by mapping the Winters Foundation's organizational structure on a whiteboard. Harrison Winters, Olivia's father, sat at the apex as chairman and CEO. Below him were 12 board members, including the now contested seat that should have been mine. According to Uncle Richard's meticulous notes, 3 of those members were actively involved in the financial misconduct. 4 others were likely unwitting participants, signing off on reports without proper scrutiny. "These 4 are our targets for proxy votes," Simon said, circling their names with a red marker: Carolyn Westfield, James Thornton, Dr. Anita Patil, and Senator Martin Douglas. Once they understand their legal exposure, they'll want to distance themselves as quickly as possible. "Assuming they believe us," I pointed out, studying their profiles. "The Winters family has considerable influence. These are all successful, established people with reputations to protect." "That's where this comes in." Marcus held up the micro SD card. "I've authenticated the audio recordings. They're untampered and legally obtained since Richard was present at these meetings, and Minnesota is a one-party consent state for recordings. I've also prepared individual dossiers for each board member," Diana added, sliding 4 folders across the table. "Personal backgrounds, professional vulnerabilities, connections to the Winters family. Carolyn Westfield is particularly promising. She's already distanced herself from Harrison over other ethical concerns." I flipped through the folders, impressed by the thoroughness. Diana had compiled news articles, social media posts, even charitable donation records. "How did you get all this information so quickly?" "I was a research librarian before I taught literature," Diana said with a small smile. "And I've been helping Simon with this case since Richard died. We just didn't have the key piece, the evidence you found." "We're not just going after leverage for your divorce," Simon reminded me, his expression serious. "We're dismantling a criminal enterprise masquerading as a charitable foundation. People who thought they were donating to education initiatives and environmental protection have been funding Harrison Winters' real estate empire and political influence machine." I nodded, both terrified and exhilarated by the scale of what we were attempting. "And Ryan's role in all this?" Simon consulted his notes, adjusting his reading glasses. "Based on the timeline we've reconstructed, he was approached by Harrison Winters approximately 20 months ago. The initial contact appeared legitimate, discussion of funding for his startup. Over time, he was drawn deeper into their orbit. And into Olivia's arms," I added bitterly, trying to maintain professional detachment, but failing. "Yes, though it's unclear whether she pursued him on her father's instructions or if that developed organically." Simon chose his words carefully, watching my reaction. "Does it matter?" My voice was sharper than I intended. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. "I'm sorry. This is still difficult." "It's understandable," Diana said gently. "And to answer your question, yes, it might matter. In terms of determining his legal culpability, the recordings suggest he was being manipulated, at least initially. Whether he later became a willing participant is harder to determine. I thought about the Ryan I'd known. Ambitious, yes, but I'd never believed him capable of deliberate criminal activity. He'd always been driven but ethical in his business dealings, at least as far as I knew. Had I been naive, or had they changed him? Either way, I needed clarity before proceeding. "That's one thing I hope to determine tomorrow night," I said, closing the folders. How much he knew, when he knew it, and whether he was a victim or a co-conspirator. Diana looked concerned, maternal worry crossing her face. "Are you sure meeting him alone is wise? We could arrange for security, or Simon could—" "No," I interrupted. "This has to be just us. He'll be more likely to reveal something if he's comfortable, and I need to see him face to face, to understand what was real and what wasn't." The truth was, despite everything, a small part of me still hoped there was an explanation that would make sense of it all. Some scenario where Ryan had been coerced or misled, where our marriage hadn't been completely a lie. I knew it was probably foolish, but I needed that closure before I could fully commit to what came next. Marcus cleared his throat. If you're determined to meet him alone, at least let me set you up with recording equipment. Minnesota's one party. Consent laws would make anything he says admissible. I hesitated, torn between practical strategy and emotional need. Would that be legal for the divorce proceedings? Completely, Simon confirmed, and potentially crucial for the larger case against the Winters Foundation. All right, I agreed. But something discreet. If he suspects I'm recording him, he'll never open up, Marcus nodded. I have just the thing, a modified pendant necklace. It looks completely ordinary. Let's go through the sequence again, Simon said, bringing us back to the task at hand. He flipped to a fresh page on the legal pad. Friday night, Eliza meets with Ryan, primarily for intelligence gathering, not confrontation. I nodded, feeling a flutter of anxiety at the thought of seeing Ryan again. The man I'd built a life with, who had discarded me with such calculating efficiency. Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp, we file the motion to recognize Eliza's board position with the foundation, simultaneously submitting our evidence of financial misconduct to these specific board members. He pointed to the 4 potential allies. Monday afternoon, assuming at least 2 agree to provide proxy votes, we call for an emergency board meeting under Section 8.3 of the bylaws, which allows for immediate assembly in cases of suspected criminal activity or gross financial misconduct, Diana added, referencing a highlighted passage from the Foundation's governing documents. Precisely. By Tuesday morning, we should have enough votes to remove Harrison Winters and his co-conspirators from the board. By Tuesday afternoon, we install an interim leadership team and announce a full audit and cooperation with authorities. Marcus picked up the thread. I've already prepared secure digital packages of the evidence for each board member, accessible only with individual passcodes that will be provided by courier Monday morning. This prevents leaks and ensures simultaneous discovery. And the divorce? I asked, trying to focus on the practical aspects rather than the emotional ones. We file our counter-proposal on Monday as well, but it becomes largely irrelevant once the Foundation scandal breaks. Ryan will be in no position to contest anything, and the Winters family will have far bigger concerns than your settlement, Itier. All sounded clean and efficient in theory, but I knew enough about life to understand that plans rarely survived contact with reality unscathed. What's our biggest vulnerability? I asked, needing to understand the weak points in our strategy. Simon considered, removing his glasses and polishing them thoughtfully. Timing. If the Winters family gets wind of our evidence before we secure those proxy votes, they could move to destroy records, intimidate witnesses, or worse. Define worse. I pressed. Simon and Diana exchanged glances. Your uncle was very careful about how he stored this evidence and who knew about it, Simon said carefully. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he died of a supposedly natural heart attack 3 weeks after resigning from the board. A chill ran through me. You think they had something to do with his death? I have no proof, Simon said quickly. And Richard did have a previous cardiac event 2 years earlier, but the timing always struck me as suspicious. There's also the issue of Jeffrey, Diana added. He's been trying to access the lake property for years. What if he's working with the Winters family? He returns from abroad on Tuesday, which is why we need to move quickly, Simon concluded. Once our plan is in motion, the evidence becomes public enough that silencing us would only create more problems for them. But until then, I asked. Until then, we're vulnerable, Simon admitted. You especially, since you'll be meeting with Ryan. The gravity of what we were undertaking settled over me. This wasn't just about my divorce or even Uncle Richard's legacy. We were challenging powerful people who had potentially committed serious crimes and gone to great lengths to cover them up. Should we involve the authorities sooner? I asked, For protection? Simon shook his head. Without knowing who the Winters family might have influence over, that could backfire. But I've enlisted private security for all of us through Tuesday. Discreet, but effective. I noticed a man I didn't recognize sitting in Simon's reception area when we'd arrived that morning. Now his presence made more sense. I've also prepared this. Simon slid a sealed envelope across the table. Contingency plans. If anything goes wrong, if any of us is compromised, the others follow these instructions. It ensures the evidence still comes to light. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from strategic planning to something more somber. The stakes suddenly felt very real, very personal. Maybe I shouldn't meet with Ryan after all, I said, doubt creeping in. That's your decision, Simon replied. But from a strategic perspective, what you might learn could be invaluable. And frankly, your absence now after agreeing to meet might raise suspicions. Diana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You don't have to do this alone, Eliza. We can find another way. I thought about Uncle Richard, meticulously gathering evidence for years, knowing the risks but persisting because he believed in justice. I thought about the recordings we'd heard, Harrison Winters and his cronies discussing my marriage as a business transaction, my husband as an acquisition. No, I said, straightening my shoulders. I'll meet with Ryan as planned, but I want to add something to our strategy. For the next hour, I outlined my addition to the plan. Simon raised objections at first, concerned about increased risk, but gradually came around as we worked through the details. It's unorthodox, he admitted finally, but it addresses several vulnerabilities in our approach, and it's fitting. Uncle Richard would approve, I think, Diana said with a small smile. It has a certain elegant justice to it. By the time we finished that evening, our strategy had evolved into something more nuanced than a simple corporate takeover or legal maneuver. It had become, in some ways, a reflection of who I was, a kindergarten teacher who believed in fairness, transparency, and the power of truth. As I drove back to Diana's cottage that night, exhausted but clear-headed, I realized something important. Regardless of the outcome, I was no longer simply reacting to Ryan's betrayal. I was choosing my path forward. Friday's dinner at Castellino's wouldn't just be about getting information from Ryan. It would be about saying goodbye to the woman I had been, the woman who had defined herself as Ryan Bennett's wife, and embracing who I was becoming. The thought was terrifying. It was also exhilarating. Castellino's hadn't changed. The same soft lighting, white tablecloths, and quiet hum of conversation. The maitre d' recognized me, his professional smile faltering slightly. No doubt he'd heard about Ryan and Olivia's engagement. Mrs. Bennett, how lovely to see you. Mr. Bennett has already arrived. I wore a simple black dress with my grandmother's locket tucked safely in my purse. Around my neck hung the pendant Marcus had given me, a discreet recording device. Ryan stood as I approached, looking polished in an expensive suit I'd never seen before. Eliza. He leaned in for a cheek kiss, which I avoided by extending my hand. Thanks for coming. You said we should talk, so talk. The waiter appeared with wine, a Bordeaux we'd always ordered for special occasions. Ryan must have arranged it in advance, a calculated nostalgia play. You look well, he said. I was worried about you. Were you? When exactly did this worry occur? Before or after announcing your engagement the same day you left me? Ryan looked uncomfortable. That wasn't planned. Olivia's father had already scheduled the press release about the new fund. The engagement just happened to coincide. How convenient? Eliza, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But this doesn't have to be acrimonious. My lawyers tell me you haven't responded to our settlement offer. I've been busy. Busy. With what? Simon Blackwood? A slight edge crept into his voice. He's not exactly known for family law. What exactly are you planning? For 20 minutes, we engaged in the surreal dance of estranged spouses making small talk. Finally, I set down my fork, meeting his eyes directly. Why did you really want to meet tonight? He hesitated. I'm worried about you. You're making a mistake by fighting this divorce. The settlement offer is generous. $50,000 is more than fair considering the length of our marriage. Is that what 12 years of marriage is worth? $50,000? It's not about worth. It's about moving forward. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, there are things happening that you don't understand. This needs to be resolved quickly. Because of the Winters Foundation? Or because of your new position at Breakthrough Next? Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Perhaps concern. Both. It's complicated. When did they approach you, Ryan? The Winters family. When did they first contact you about working with them? What does that matter? It was a professional connection that evolved naturally. Like your relationship with Olivia evolved naturally? Nothing about this has been natural, Ryan. It's been calculated, orchestrated. The only question is whether you were a willing participant from the beginning or just a useful pawn they manipulated. Ryan's expression hardened. You don't know. What you're talking about? This isn't some conspiracy, Eliza? Then why did Harrison Winters refer to you as the Bennett acquisition in a board meeting 18 months ago, before you'd even met Olivia? The color drained from Ryan's face. What? Are you talking about? How would you know what was said in a Winters Foundation board meeting? My Uncle Richard kept records, Ryan, of everything. Board meetings, financial transactions, the shell companies, the money laundering, all of it. He forced a laugh. That's absurd. Richard Harrington died 3 years ago. Is that what they told you? Is that why they targeted you? Because you were married to his niece? Was I just collateral damage in their pursuit of the lake property? Ryan's hand tightened around his wine glass. I don't know what Simon Blackwood has been telling you, but you're venturing into dangerous territory. The Winters family isn't to be trifled with. Is that a threat? It's advice. His voice dropped to a near whisper. For your own good, Eliza. Take the settlement, sign the papers, walk away. Or what? He signaled for the check. I thought we could do this amicably. I see I was mistaken. As the waiter processed his credit card, Ryan tried one last approach. Whatever you think you know, it's not worth pursuing. The lake property isn't worth your safety. So he did know about the lake property. Confirmation that we'd been right about everything? My safety? I repeated. Are you concerned for me, Ryan, or delivering someone else's warning? As we stood to leave, I reached into my purse and withdrew a small envelope. Before you go, I have something for you. What's this? Open it outside. Outside, Ryan paused under a streetlight and opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. Ryan and Olivia at the Christmas gala where they'd supposedly first met, dated 6 months before he claimed they'd been introduced. Where did you get this? That's not the only record my uncle kept, Ryan. Monday. Morning. Simon Blackwood will file motions that will change everything. For the divorce, for the Winters Foundation, for your precious CEO position. What are you talking about? What motions? You're an intelligent man. Figure it out. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Ryan. Despite everything, I hope you weren't involved in what happened to my uncle. For your sake. The weekend passed in tense anticipation. Simon's security team reported increased activity at the Winters estate. Late-night arrivals, early morning departures, lights burning until dawn. By Sunday evening, everything was in place. 4 couriers had been briefed, each assigned to deliver information packets to our target board members precisely at 9 a.m. Monday. Simon's legal filings were prepared to be submitted electronically to the court at the same time. I barely slept that night, running through every scenario in my mind. By Monday afternoon, we had secured 3 proxy votes from board members shocked by the evidence we'd provided. That evening, Ryan called. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Do you have any idea what you've set in motion?" "I believe I do, yes. Harrison Winters is not someone you want as an enemy. Call off this board meeting. Withdraw whatever claims you've filed. It's not too late to fix this." "Fix what, exactly? The financial fraud? The money laundering? Or just my inconvenient inheritance of Uncle Richard's board seat? You don't understand what you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly. What I don't understand is how you got involved with these people. Was it worth it, Ryan? Trading our marriage for a corner office and Olivia Winters? That's not how it happened." For a moment, he sounded like the Ryan I'd known. "Look, whatever you think of me, this isn't about us anymore. You're in danger, Eliza. Real danger." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. Harrison he's not stable. When he feels cornered, just be careful." Tuesday morning arrived bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a navy suit with my grandmother's locket around my neck. The Winters Foundation headquarters occupied the top floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. Security was tight. Our names checked against a visitor list, IDs examined, bags searched. Harrison Winters was already there, surrounded by his legal team. Beside him stood Olivia, elegant in a cream suit, her expression glacial when she saw me. Ryan stood slightly apart from them, looking uncomfortable. The boardroom was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic city views, a massive walnut table, leather chairs for each board member. I found my place card. R. Harrington, estate representative, deliberately placed between 2 Winters allies. At precisely 10 a.m., Harrison called the meeting to order. "Before we proceed with this irregular session, I'd like to address the concerning materials that have been circulating. These documents contain misrepresentations and outright fabrications." Dr. Anita Patil interrupted smoothly. "Perhaps we should follow proper procedure, Harrison. The meeting was called under Bylaw 8.3, which requires the immediate establishment of an investigating committee before any other business." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Of course, Anita. Always the stickler for procedure." For the next hour, the boardroom became a battlefield. Harrison and his allies attempted to dismiss the evidence as misleading or taken out of context. Dr. Patil, James Thornton, and Senator Douglas, our allies, pressed for a formal investigation. I mostly observed, speaking only when directly addressed, letting Simon handle the legal aspects. Finally, Harrison tried a different approach. "Even if these allegations warranted investigation, Ms. Bennett has no standing in this room. She is not Richard Harrington's legal heir to his board position." "Actually," Simon interjected, "she is, as confirmed by the court filing accepted yesterday morning, and it's Ms. Harrington now." "There's also the matter of the contested lake property," Jeffrey Harrington spoke up. "That property belongs to me. Richard transferred ownership before his death." "That claim has also been resolved," Simon said, sliding copies of a court order across the table. "The judge has confirmed Ms. Harrington's ownership under the trust established by Richard Harrington 5 years ago. The supposed transfer to Mr. Jeffrey Harrington has been deemed fraudulent." The room fell silent. Harrison's face had grown increasingly flushed. Finally, he stood. "This meeting is adjourned pending review by our legal team." "I'm afraid not," Dr. Patil said firmly. "According to the bylaws, this meeting cannot be adjourned until the investigating committee is established. We have a quorum. We will proceed." What happened next occurred with breathtaking speed. Harrison lunged toward me, his composure finally breaking. "You think you can walk in here and destroy everything I've built? You're nothing. Your uncle was. Nothing. Security personnel, not the Foundation's, but those Simon had stationed nearby, intervened immediately, restraining Harrison as he continued to shout threats. Dr. Patil calmly continued the meeting as Harrison was escorted out. I moved to establish an investigating committee with full access to all financial records, effective immediately. The motion passed 7-4, with 2 members abstaining. In the chaos of Harrison's outburst, we had gained additional support from board members shocked by his behavior. I further move that Harrison Winters be suspended from all Foundation activities pending the investigation's outcome. This motion passed 8-3. Finally, I move that Eliza Harrington be appointed as interim executive director to oversee operations during this transition period. The vote was 6-5 in favor, with Senator Douglas casting the deciding vote, and just like that, I became the acting head of the Winters Foundation. As the meeting adjourned, Ryan approached me while Olivia was distracted with damage control. Planned this, he said, his voice a mixture of awe and dismay. No, I replied honestly. Harrison's breakdown was his own doing. I just created the circumstances where his true character would reveal itself. What happens now? He glanced toward Olivia, who was watching us with barely concealed fury. Now? The Foundation will be investigated thoroughly. Those responsible for financial crimes will be prosecuted, and the organization will be restructured to fulfill its original mission, actual charitable work. And us? He gestured between us. The divorce? Already filed my counter-proposal. You can keep your position with Olivia's venture fund, if it survives the scrutiny it's about to receive. I want nothing from you, Ryan. Not anymore. For what it's worth, I didn't know about the financial fraud when I got involved with them. By the time I realized, I was compromised. You always had a choice, I said quietly. You just made the wrong one. 6 months later, I stood at the podium in the newly renamed Harrington Foundation's conference center. Behind me, a portrait of Uncle Richard watched over the proceedings. Today marks not just a rebranding, I told the assembled reporters and community leaders, but a rebirth. The investigation confirmed what many suspected. This organization had strayed far from its charitable mission. With those responsible, now facing justice, we can return to the work of making real impact in our communities. Harrison Winters and 3 board members were awaiting trial on multiple financial charges. Jeffrey Harrington had fled the country. Olivia's venture fund had collapsed under scrutiny. And Ryan? He'd cooperated with investigators, receiving immunity in exchange for his testimony. Last I heard, he was teaching business ethics at a community college in Arizona, an ironic twist that might actually suit him. After the press conference, Diana joined me in my new office. You did it, she said, squeezing my hand. Richard would be so proud. Simon entered, carrying champagne. To celebrate the Foundation's new educational initiative, full scholarships for 500 deserving students this fall. As we toasted, I looked around at what had once been the center of the Winters empire, now transformed into something that would truly help people. You know, Diana said thoughtfully, when you first came to our cottage that night, you were broken by what Ryan had done. Now look at you. I touched my grandmother's locket. Uncle Richard once wrote that sometimes our greatest setbacks prepare us for our greatest opportunities. I didn't understand that until now. From the windows, I could see all the way to the lake where Uncle Richard's property, my property, sparkled, in the distance. I'd decided to convert it into a retreat center for families dealing with terminal illness. Life had come full circle in the most unexpected way. Ryan had left me for his rich mistress, believing he was trading up to a better life. Instead, he had inadvertently set me on a path to discover my own inheritance. Not just the material wealth Uncle Richard had left me, but the strength, purpose, and determination that had always been within me, waiting to be claimed. Sometimes betrayal isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's just the beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.